Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. If you haven't seen me before, my name is Bruce. I work at Megabit Publishing, and I'm the community manager for Grit and Valor 1949. Today, I'm joined by two very special guests over at the development studio Milky Tea. I'd like to introduce them now. Let's hop right into it. I don't see any reason to wait. Kev, say hello to our lovely audience, and could you give us a quick intro as to who you are?
Yeah, sure. Hey, lovely audience. I'm Kevin from Milky Tea. I'm the producer on the project Grit and Valor 1949. Very excited to join you here today, Bruce. And I guess I'll pass over to my colleague, Scott.
Hey, so I'm Scott. I'm one of the game designers on Grit and Valor. And yeah, looking to dive into the boss and everything we've done to develop it.
Yeah, that's the perfect segue. Thank you, Scott. I actually omitted the reason we're here today, which is to talk about the British Isles boss, General Harmsworth. So thank you for doing that. On that note, congratulations to you both. We've actually just had the announcement of the British Isles boss. How does it feel to have your work out in the public now? Well, obviously Grit's been out for a while, but the boss specifically.
I mean, it's super exciting because whenever you work on something for so long, there's a slight nervousness as to kind of how it's going to be received with the public, and it's super gratifying to get a load of positive comments about the boss level. Everyone seems to think it looks super cool. From the early kind of testing we've had of the boss, people think it plays really nicely. So yeah, just having it out in the world now, finally being able to talk about it is super cool, really rewarding.
For anyone who's watching at the time this video has come out, before December 2nd, we're in actually the sign-up window for the beta. So if you want to get hands-on with the boss for yourself and see the things that we're talking about in a hands-on way, you'll be able to do that and make sure you sign up. Kev, for anyone who's not familiar with Grit and Valor as a whole and is seeing us for the first time, could you give a quick overview of what the game is about? I know that's a difficult ask because there's so much to it.
So Grit and Valor is a real-time tactics roguelike game set in 1949 in this really gritty diesel punk alternate reality world we've created. Just as a brief overview is what you as a player do. You lead this kind of squad of mechs, these mechs driven by these resistance pilots, and each of the levels is this like self-contained diorama, and your aim is to survive the enemy waves, and these enemies are these Axis mechs and infantry troops which are obviously trying to take you out, and you just got to use all of the game mechanics at your disposal, the tactics, strategies that you develop to survive the enemy waves, complete the level, and kind of progress through region to region in the game.
Perfect. Thank you. No, that was really apt. I can tell you've done that a few times by now. To hop into it then, what is the first boss that we've just revealed, and how does it fit into that wider landscape of the game?
Yeah, so the first region in the game is the British Isles region. That's one of 4 regions in the game. So the first boss we've revealed is the British Isles Axis general, whose name is General Harmsworth. He's a British general. He obviously used to work for the British government. He's this kind of industrialist guy, but at the first opportunity when the Axis have kind of taken over Europe, he's jumped ship. He said, "These guys are winning. I'm going to join the Axis." So yeah, he's not to be trusted. He's basically kind of out for his own means, and he's the kind of adversary we've put at the end of this first region. Yeah, Scott, is there anything to add to that about the general, I guess?
With each region, the player's got a little bit of a mission to complete. Obviously, our overall goal is to get the EMP to Machine Tower so that we can take down the Axis. But within each region, there's specific things that you might have to do that's going to aid that journey. So with the British Isles, we've got the EMP, but it's not quite completed yet. So we want to get to the south coast essentially to find this scientist who's going to help us complete the EMP. But the scientist at the moment is essentially taken hostage by the Axis and General Harmsworth.
Up until this point, the players will be used to the standard missions where there's sort of wave-based gameplay and you're fighting off enemies as they come in. This will be the first time they're faced with something entirely different. Can you talk about the mechanics that are involved in fighting this boss?
The idea with this boss level specifically, and maybe going forwards with other regions, is to take everything that the players learn throughout that region and kind of dial it up to 11 almost. So a lot of the different strategies and mechanics that the player will be learning and dealing with throughout the region will be almost tested on that final level with the boss. So the level itself, we've got a science research lab where this scientist that we want to get back is held. The boss is basically trying to destroy this research lab as a way of, if I can't keep her, then no one can. So we want to try and protect that lab as the boss is storming towards it and fighting us along the way.
But what are the opportunities for player to use the various mechanics that you've taught them along the way throughout the British Isles region up until this point?
We teach players a lot of the basic mechanics throughout the British Isles. Over the course of that, the player will learn how to read the environment in terms of using the high ground to gain an advantage, using cover to obviously try and protect yourself and also find the best position to fight enemies from, and also learning how to deal with objectives and different enemy types.
Yeah, and that seems to be a really key part of obviously the game as a whole, especially with the sort of type system that we've got. Does that come into play in the boss level as well? And if it does, sort of how so?
Throughout normal levels, the player will see fire class mechs and ballistic class mechs, explosive class. And the player will learn, okay, there's an explosive one dropping in here, so I'm going to go and fight that with my ballistic mech to gain the advantage. With the boss, it kind of has this rotating turret of weapons. So it'll use a fire weapon for a brief period, and then it'll switch it up and use an explosive, for example. So it's times like that where you think, okay, I'm going to push one of my mechs away for a second to get that into cover and try and protect it, and then use another class of mech to attack and gain the advantage.
There's also there's like distinct phases in the boss battle, which is what Scott's talking about there, where the phases make use of one of the damage classes, and then between the phases we've got what we call like a hunker down mode, where the boss will just kind of like protect itself, like put up barriers around it, and then call in help from or deliver like these mortar strikes that you've got to kind of look out for in these hunker down phases in the boss level.
One of the things that sort of has to be mentioned about the boss is the sheer size and scale of it compared to anything that players have seen up until this point.
So yeah, it's much bigger. We wanted it to be, this really kind of impressive unit, and just terrify the life out of players and think, oh, okay, I've never seen a mech like this before in the first region. And ultimately, this mech is kind of a reflection of the general. A, we wanted it to make the player think, oh wow, this is going to be a challenge. But B, we just wanted it to kind of look really impressive on the battlefield and look different from the other mechs we've created so far. So all of the mechs that we kind of create going forward have kind of followed this same kind of vein, that they're kind of a reflection of the general that kind of pilots them.
On the topic of the size of this monstrosity, did that present any design challenges or difficulties or unexpected challenges during the design process?
I guess I'll just give a little bit of background to this. Maybe Scott can talk to the design challenges. Bosses came into the game quite late into development. We would just create the regions to just feature kind of standard levels throughout. You got to the end, you completed your objective, you captured the scientist, but you'd never encountered a boss. So we really wanted to kind of put that bookend to the region and give the player something to aim for.
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge initially, because we had the game's tile based, right? So we designed everything around things being a certain size and got other things to put in the levels with the different environment pieces and ramps and objectives and so on. So as soon as you put a mech in the 3x3, so it's 9 tiles, it takes up a good portion of the level. It was an interesting challenge, but I think it was quite cool actually designing the level and designing the fight around that. And then just visually, it was quite interesting, because sometimes you've got to sort of remind yourself of the scale. Each normal mech is the size of a house. So when you think of this 3x3 mech that we've got now with the boss, basically like a walk-in factory or warehouse or something, it's absolutely huge. So it was a little bit of a challenge in terms of getting the visuals and the animation to look right, because the boss is so big. And we took a lot of cues from experimental World War II vehicles as well.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. And I was lucky enough to speak to Luke and Rich from the art team the other week about how they work with you guys to bring the design and the vision together and reflect it in the appearance as well, which is really, really interesting to hear about. Scott, I'd like to ask you, were there any learnings on the design and sort of game mechanics front that you're going to bring forward to other bosses? My understanding is that we're going to have a boss at the end of every region. Yeah, anything that you're going to sort of bring forward to the later ones?
Yeah, definitely. So as Kev mentioned, that initial process took a little while, and a lot of that was just prototyping the boss, even just with some untextured cubes that were jumping about and things. I think doing that, it allowed us to figure out what works really well, but also what doesn't work. We've been able to essentially create a list and some guidelines of what makes a bad boss as much as what makes it exciting. So I think that's allowed us to go forward with the new regions and figure out some cool ideas with what plays really well and what's going to excite players and test them in different ways. There's so much that we're going to do to make each boss for the future regions feel very different and test players in unique ways. So for example, each region is going to play very differently in terms of the environment and what types of units and enemies the players are going to deal with in those environments, and then that can inform the way the boss works as well. So each boss is going to be a vastly different challenge and something totally fresh each time.
I think we, as Scott alluded to, I think we kind of learned from the process quite a bit. Definitely kind of what we can't do, and kind of having those kind of like guidelines and rails that we knew we wanted to kind of go down really helped, because I think at the start we were just like so excited to be creating kind of these bosses who were just like, okay, we can kind of do anything, let's kind of go wild. And then we just kind of quickly realized, okay, well, it still needs to kind of work within the kind of constraints of the game and the mechanics that the players have learned. So I think having those guides really have helped bosses going forward.
How do you balance challenging the player without making the boss too frustrating or too difficult? Like how do you approach crafting an experience that sort of hits that spot of difficult enough to be a challenge that's rewarding, but not so difficult that it puts people off?
It really comes into a lot of that prototyping. So going into creating the boss, we knew there was almost a list of ingredients that we could take from the region in terms of the different challenges that you face and things like that. The first iteration of the boss that we had was extremely difficult because we threw a lot of those ingredients in and just wanted to test like what was too much and then scale it back a little bit. So quite early on when we did that prototype, we just let the team play it for a little while and just essentially did an anonymous questionnaire and let people be really open about what their experience was and what things they didn't like and what things they would like to see. Quite early on in that phase, we were able to sort of refine the boss and the way it played quite nicely, I think. And then obviously now we're going to test that to players on a vaster scale. We'll be able to see if that's worked well, which I think it has.
It's a tricky one though, right? Because the games are roguelite, so players are kind of encountering the bosses at kind of different stages in their kind of journey. You know, people might get to the boss kind of without kind of upgrading their squad much or getting many rewards throughout the run, whereas some people might kind of encounter the boss much further down the line and their squad's much more advanced. It's difficult to kind of balance the boss for every player. I think, you know, as Scott's alluded to, the first thing we looked for was, okay, is it fun? Does it do what we want to do in terms of testing the mechanics that players have learned in that first region? So that's kind of where we've been coming at it from in terms of balancing or testing. But I think once we get this beta out, I think that's when we'll kind of really get a lot of data that's going to inform us on the overall balance of that first region.
That's actually an excellent segue. Thank you very much. As for a reminder to sign up to the beta, if anyone watching you haven't yet signed up and you do want to get hands-on and try out the boss for yourself and give our lovely team here over at Milky Tea some feedback on that experience, you'll be able to sign up to that using a link in the description of wherever you're watching this video. To wrap things up then, and thank you again both so much for taking the time to share your thoughts and experiences with me here. I'm going to ask you each, what's been your favourite or most rewarding part of this process of creating the British Isles boss? I'll start with you, Scott.
For me, it's just those first few play tests with the wider team. So we had a little core team that were building the boss that we got to a point where we were happy with it, but then actually sort of releasing it into the wild to some of the team who were playing it for the first time and seeing the different ways that they tackled the boss was really exciting, because they were doing things that we didn't even think you could do and using strategies that we didn't think of. So that was great, and I think again, once we sort of let the public play it, that'll be really exciting to see what else people get up to and how they beat the boss in their own way.
Yeah, I think for me, when it first started really coming apparent that this was going to be really cool, was when I saw the thing moving in the level. So once the first kind of like round of animation kind of went in and you saw this kind of like huge mech kind of lumbering through the level, I just thought, okay, no, this is cool. That was like, you know, a big kind of wow moment for me, and I thought, okay, we're onto something here with this one.
All right, well, I think that's about all we've got time for, so I'm going to thank you both again for sparing a moment to talk us through your experiences with developing the boss, and we hope that everyone watching has enjoyed these insights into what that process has been like, and yeah, that you're as excited as we are to see it in the wild for the first time and get hands on. Like I say, do sign up for the closed beta in December if you're watching before December 2nd. And yeah, I think that's about it. So yeah, thank you very much both, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.
Cheers, Bruce. See ya.